Welcome to NovoEDTalks, where we reveal real-world strategies and expert insights from learning and development and HR professionals. In every episode, we chat with practitioners, course designers, HR folks, learning strategists, and other business leaders about their experiences and the evolving trends shaping how we learn, lead, and grow at work. Before we begin, a little about NovoED. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab, NovoED is a people-centered, capability-building platform that helps organizations scale deep skill development and human connection. Through collaborative, cohort-based experiences, NovoED empowers teams to learn together, perform together, and lead together, because learning is most powerful when it's shared. And today, we're excited to be wrapping up Season 2 with something special, a two-part finale that brings together three of the brightest minds in HR and talent development for a roundtable conversation about the future of leadership, mentorship, and organizational growth. Joining me in this discussion are Dr. Benjamin Granger, Chief Workplace Psychologist at Qualtrics, where he leads global research on employee experience and organizational culture, helping HR and business leaders understand what truly drives engagement, belonging, and performance. We'll also be joined by Karen Ganitsky, who leads global sales learning and development at 3M. Over her 16 years with the company, Karen has shaped programs that connect people, products, and purpose, creating learning experiences that drive business impact across global teams. And lastly, Kathy Burton, Vice President of Global Learning and Development at Robert Half, will join us today. Kathy brings a wealth of experience in developing leaders at every level and a deep commitment to empowering both HR and L&D professionals to unlock potential in a rapidly changing world of work. Across this two-part series, we'll explore how organizations can preserve institutional knowledge while preparing the next generation of leaders. We'll discuss what it really means to lead across 5 generations in today's workforce. We'll look at how inclusive leadership programs can bring out the best in every learner, and how HR and L&D can work together to build stronger, more resilient organizations. It's a conversation about change, continuity, and the power of connection, and we can't think of a better way to close out this season. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our NovoEDTalks Season 2 finale. In part 1, we started to dive into mentorship, succession planning, and how to lead across generations. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, we strongly encourage you to go back and do so now, because it's a conversation you absolutely don't want to miss. Now, in part 2, we're going to continue this conversation with more stories, strategies, and reflections on how leaders can truly pass the torch to the next generation in an inclusive way. I'm still here with our panelists, Karen, Benjamin, and Kathy, 3 leaders who are not only driving change within their organization, but helping redefine what leadership development looks like for the modern workforce. Their passion and perspectives are such a gift. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Our first topic in part 2 of this 2-part season finale has to do with inclusive leadership development. As workplaces become more global, hybrid, and diverse, the call for inclusive leadership has never been louder, yet many leadership programs still rely on one-size-fits-all models that fail to reflect the varied experiences, learning styles, and career paths that make organizations dynamic. True inclusion in leadership development goes beyond representation. It's about creating systems that empower every individual to contribute, grow, and lead authentically. Leaders and learning teams are now exploring how to design programs that reflect this diversity in meaningful ways. From identifying and supporting talent to shaping learning experiences that resonate across roles and regions, the question becomes how to build leadership pathways that are both equitable and effective, programs that ensure every learner sees themselves represented and has the opportunity to thrive. Before we turn it over to our panelists today, let's hear again from some of our Season 2 guests. First, we'll hear from Emily Wilson on why it's important to start with who we're considering putting into leadership positions.
One of the challenges that we're having now, specifically in terms of leadership development, isn't that different from what other workplaces might face, which is that we often promote subject matter experts, not people who have the perhaps leadership development, interpersonal skills that they need to lead a team of people.
Next, we'll hear from Chantel Nash on how tailoring leadership development to real needs starts with truly listening to the workforce.
I'll step a little bit outside and go to maybe a more leadership development area. We do know that there is a strong need for additional leadership skills in that workforce as well. It could be things like decision making or coaching and things like that, whether it's the frontline leaders themselves or their managers. So we are looking at how do we understand what they most need. Leadership development is such a huge, there's so many things you can focus on. So really getting down to the competencies and skills that we're seeing could be useful for their roles. Again, making that really custom to our organization and the types of things we need is really the approach that we're taking to identify some things that, again, we don't have this yet. So I can't say what we've already done, but what we are realizing and working toward is how do we create some type of mechanism that can take those leaders through that and make them feel fulfilled. So we did just release a survey. We have some work streams going on this, and we're kind of asking, like, what do you find useful? Voice of customer is really important to us. So especially with some of the challenges they have with whether it's time or relevance of content and training, we're at the stage of finding out exactly what would be best based on their needs.
And now we'll hear from Hakeem Bashir on how staying closely connected to frontline teams strengthens leadership awareness and development.
Each department has what we call fleet managers. So if you take, for example, like guest service, learning and development, marine, based on the size of the department, they have a fleet manager who becomes their functional leader, and if you put it in other terms, is the go-between shipboard and corporate employees. And that person or team are responsible for following up with departments, conducting focus groups, unofficial conversations, or facilitating certain engagements between corporate and shipboard team members. And in some cases where we have something very strategic, we go to the ships, whether we spend time with them or go for an observation day visit and just see how things are going and having these conversations with the leadership on board.
And now we'll hear from Eddie Brasher on how a people-first philosophy can guide thoughtful, balanced leadership development priorities.
And then we also have several employee resource groups across Starbucks, and I support those as well with some of our learning initiatives. So I would say one of the biggest challenges is really prioritizing, what are the needs that we need to tackle today, right now. But then also there's an opportunity here for us to really think intentionally about developing and anchoring our professional and personal development initiatives within our Starbucks People First philosophy. So whether that's building up our digital skills or strengthening our leadership pipelines or supporting our inclusive growth, we approach every initiative really with that same lens. How does this really help our people, our partners move forward? How do we help them to grow and lead in real meaningful ways?
And lastly, we'll hear from Elizabeth Gomez on how creating safe-to-learn spaces fuels growth, competence, and modern leadership capability.
We partner closely with the HRBPs and the managers across all departments and OUs. We also encourage failure-based learning. So, in other words, we encourage safe-to-fail environments where people can learn from their mistakes. And the regular things you're going to see are simulations, right, in our learning activities. But also I want to highlight our Innovation Awards program. This year, we are admitting and rewarding unsuccessful trials. So it means that we are asking people to innovate, and if they don't succeed, like the outcomes were not as desired, still they can document it, share it, and get rewarded. So I think action speaks louder than words. As I was mentioning growth mindset, we go above and beyond to not only teach about that, but creating those spaces for people to apply the growth mindset and then get rewards.
And now we'll turn it over to our panelists to discuss how we can make a more inclusive leadership development organization. How can we design leadership development programs that give everyone, regardless of background or stage, a real seat at the table?
Maybe I'll start with I'll start very pie in the sky, because I think Karen and Kathy probably have better tactical answers than I do. But to me, inclusion is inherent in my operational definition of leadership. And I also often pose this as just a rhetorical question to consider is what is a leader if not to bring people together to work toward a common objective? And you'd be hard pressed to try to define leadership outside of that, at least in an organization. That is the ultimate job of a leader, is to bring the people, and a lot of times it's a diverse set of people, bring them together to have a shared view of what the objective is, to work together toward that group level objective. So to me, inherent in the definition of leadership is inclusion. And I think that's a really important point to just to anchor on here. But then I would go back to kind of get a little bit more tactical, is I'd go right back to mentoring. And that's a thing that can be done, even though we only saw a relative minority of our sample in our study said they believed they had access to it. The good thing about mentoring and coaching is that it doesn't have to be this big formal thing. It can actually be very informal. And you can start it up as a grassroots campaign within your own department. So it's something that a lot of people have direct control over, a lot of leaders have direct control over. And this is a great way to offer mentoring and opportunities, development opportunities to maybe people who don't feel like they have those. Maybe they don't feel seen. Maybe they don't feel like the group that they're a part of is seen in the organization, for whatever reason. But informal mentoring allows that. And one of the things we know, we see this in a lot of the studies we do of employee experiences, it's really valuable for people who feel like they're part of underrepresented groups in an organization to see others who look like them in those senior positions and have mentorship from them. It's not to say that that's only who they want mentorship from, but a lot of times they do value it, especially when they're a member of an underrepresented group. And again, the beauty of mentorship and coaching is that you can start at grassroots. Anybody can start that.
I would add on a couple things here. One is, I think it's accessibility. I think it's diversity in the definition of learning. I think when we say learning or leadership development, people think classroom. They think the very traditional sense of facilitated training. And I think learning can take place just about anywhere from just about anyone. We hear a lot of the times people want to learn from their leadership. They want to learn from their peer group. They want to learn on their own. And so we use what we call a 4 E's model: experience, exposure, environment, and education. And so, Deloitte, I think, was one of the ones that did the framework. But I think at the end of the day, taking a look at all of the different ways in which people can learn, but also doing two things. One, having a level of transparency of what the commitment is from the organization to each one of our learner groups, with some sort of learning journey, so that they know what our commitment is, that they can expect some level or cadence of sequence of development. And for example, in some of ours, some of it is self-learning, some of it is suggested on the job learning experiences, some of it has to do with mentoring, peer-to-peer mentoring, some of it has to do with formal learning. So it really does look at a holistic piece. But my point being is being transparent so that they know what our commitment is to them for their learning journey and their support. The second thing is meeting them where they're at. Because I genuinely think a lot of the times we expect our employees to meet us where we're at, either from an organizational perspective or a leadership perspective, or we just automatically assume that they're going to get on board and be exactly where we're at. And I think taking the time to understand, to explore where they're at and meeting them there goes a long way, because then they're much quicker to get on board with things. They're much quicker to pick up on things. They engage a lot sooner. So I think that's just an important piece, but also the accessibility, making sure they know where to find it, how to get it, when they can access it. So it's the equity of accessibility, it's the equity of investment, it's the transparency of the commitment that I also think encourages and it's the assumed inclusivity of it all.
I'm going to piggyback on that, Kathy, and so I'm going to give some very tactical examples of things that I've seen and done this year. So early in the year, there's big changes that we were doing in how we were managing our sales teams. And there was a session that our sales executive leaders created. And in that session, they kind of presented the strategy, the framework, and in an unexpected twist of events, they turned it to the managers, to the first level sales managers, and said, "What do you think?" And everyone was just taken aback because they had never gotten that question. And talk about getting a seat at the table was they got a chance to give their opinion on the direction they were going to get handed down to them versus just the top down that we typically see. The response was phenomenal. So once people understood that it was for real that they were asking, it wasn't just like a filler question like, "What do you think? You like it? Okay, good. We're going to carry on," right? But they actually wanted the feedback. And that then led way to us doing a 2-day workshop in person across the globe. So again, it actually created a program. And now we're doing monthly, what we're calling coaching gyms. And that term is not mine. I stole it from someone at Tice. But it's a cohort base, so up to like 25 first level sales managers. And we get together, we talk about these strategic new processes that are coming down. How is it really going? And then we take that back up to leadership and they take action. So then we come back and we tell them what actions were taken based on their feedback. So this is a huge organization, right? We have over 70,000 people globally. We have over 450 sales managers across the globe. It's really hard to get them in a room. But by doing this, we're giving them a voice. And when people feel that they're getting a voice and then they're seeing programs come to them or changes come to them, that is a direct response to that, it just becomes a talent accelerator. So I just wanted to mention those very tactical things that I saw this year that really worked phenomenally. And I don't think I had ever seen them in the past.
I love that example. And I love your point about, actually asking that question, right? Because how often do organizations just be like, "Oh, how do you feel about this on a scale of 1 to 10? And then that's it. And let's move on." So that's great. And what an incredible result for you all. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add before we move on to the next question?
I was just going to back up with some points that both Karen and Kathy made. One, we've seen the accessibility point that you mentioned, Kathy, is a really important one. This is one where we've seen sometimes it can happen accidentally or inadvertently. Great example of this is when we look at for example, remote workers that might incidentally correlate with people with disabilities, for example, and remote workers not knowing that these resources exist because they're not around and talk about it with people in the water cooler, might be sitting on this intranet site that they didn't check. And this is something we always remind leaders that we work with. Oftentimes they'll see what they view as the reality of what's going on in the organization. Like you said, Karen, they believe they're acting on employee feedback. And oftentimes employees don't see it. And if they don't know about it, then in their minds, it didn't happen. And so we have to remember that subjective reality. I think that goes right along with accessibility. And also the fact that when these people, a lot of times it's unintentional, but just because they're not in the group talking about it, or they're not part of that leadership meeting, or they don't know that Slack channel exists, they could feel like they're on the outs. They could believe truly that doesn't exist for them. That's not there for them. And it is. So a lot of times it's that communication out there. And then back to Karen's point, we've seen over and over and over again through our research, the value of simply asking questions of employees, especially from people in power. To me, that's just a show of vulnerability. When I was like, "Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, we're thinking, what do you think about the way we're going?" That simple question it has tremendous power. And we have seen in organizations that increase the amount of listening they do to their employees, they see dramatically better job attitudes from the employees, way more discretionary effort, way more likelihood to stick around and be loyal. Just asking that question, what do you think? What do you think we should do? How do you feel about this? Incredibly powerful question.
Absolutely. I want to shift gears a little bit because we would be remiss if we didn't talk about AI in this discussion, right? What are, in your opinion, the most critical leadership development skills for the future? Is it technical and AI capabilities, or is it the human-centered skills that enable leaders to use these technologies effectively?
There's two pieces that I would like to call out here. One is, I think IQ gets you in the game, right? We have resumes. We're all hired for some very, expertise focused skill sets. EQ, emotional intelligence, keeps you in the game. And so I think there is, and I think keeping an eye on keeping your skills current. So from a technology perspective, from a change management perspective, from a leading change, transition, evolution, innovation, creating that kind of not only that skill set, but that mindset, that approach. And then also the human side of things. Are you able to understand and read for lack of a better term, read the room? Do you have self-awareness, especially from a leadership perspective? That is the biggest gift. I think that we as learning professionals can help individuals gain insight to is their leadership, is their self-awareness. Because self-awareness basically equates do we view ourselves how others experience us? And with that, there's a ton of gifts that come from that. But if I were to come down to a couple things, one is obviously the business savvy, the technology, the emotional intelligence, also being able to navigate change, operate in ambiguity, judgment, I think is a big one these days, autonomy. So I think those are some of the bigger ones. Some of those are timeless, but they take on different shades as we evolve from an era.
I'm gonna kind of add to that, Kathy. And I was thinking as you were speaking, like we definitely expect leaders and employees, so whether you're using the technology and AI, or you have to be aware of what's out there and how it can help the organization. But I'm with Kathy that the EQ component just became exponentially more important because a lot of the technical things, maybe they can be done eventually. Everything will be done by AI, but the EQ component will remain innately a human trait that we're bringing to the workplace. And I think with that, one of the things we have to be aware of and watchful of, and I don't know that that's on everyone's radar yet, is the emotional impact of the technology, the loneliness that can come from that, and different societal impacts that are going to be put under pressure because of how it's going to shift our culture. Maybe I'm going too deep here, but I think I don't know, maybe I'm too philosophical. But with that EQ piece and the part of being very human in your leadership and relating to the human and pulling out that emotion, leading with heart. I guess I've heard it put that way. And that's going to be even more important as we continue to absolutely leverage this for productivity and to make processes and products better. But you have to remain even more so human. If that makes sense.
I love
Absolutely.
that. And I think it always reminds me, just what are organizations? It's a group of people using shared resources to accomplish a shared objective. And by the way, that objective is almost invariably about meeting the needs of other groups of people. We've always done that as humans. Today we do that in groups we call companies and organizations. But I totally agree with both of you. In my opinion, there has to be, we must double down on these technical skills to learn how to use AI appropriately. I think one thing, to your point, Karen, in the philosophical point, we also need to make sure that we're teaching people how not to use it as a complete crutch and atrophy our critical thinking. That I think is really important. Things that we used to sit around the virtual campfire to discuss and build our own shared mental models and actually develop ideas in our minds. Now AI can do that like that. What are we losing when we do that? So I think the technical skills of how to leverage AI to combine it with human intelligence in the best ways, essential. We have to get on board with this, because if we don't, we will get left behind. But then on the same side, we need to be investing at least equally in developing these human skills, because I completely agree with you, Karen. As we start to offload some traditional work to AI, which is inevitable, that will happen, it's going to increase the need for those human skills. And so where I would place my bet, if I were a betting man, I'd put my money on developing the meta skills. So it's hard for us to predict exactly what's going to happen in 5 years. It's even harder to predict what's going to happen in 10 years because of how quickly things are changing. So what do we invest in terms of people skills in 10 years? Well, it's hard to say. But one thing for sure, and I think this is mentioned, teaching people how to learn, teaching people how to adapt, teaching people how to be resilient. Those are those meta skills that help people develop what skills are going to be necessary in 5 or 10 years. So I'm a big fan of that, and I like it when I see organizations equally investing in using AI and how to use it ethically and how to use it effectively and how to augment your work with it. And we're teaching you how to learn. We're teaching you how to be a critical thinker. We're teaching you how to use good judgment.
Absolutely. At this point, I'd like to switch gears and jump into our next topic. This next topic has to do with aligning HR and L&D for impact as we move forward. Human resources and learning and development share the same ultimate goal: to attract, develop, and retain talent that drives organizational success. Yet in many organizations, these functions still operate in silos, limiting their ability to create cohesive strategies that connect learning to performance and business outcomes. As the workplace evolves and skills demands shift, alignment between HR and L&D has become essential. A more connected strategic partnership can turn talent development into a true competitive advantage, one that links capability building directly to culture, engagement, and measurable impact. Before we turn it over to our panelists, let's again hear from some of our Season 2 podcast guest speakers. First, we'll hear an example from Dr. Fola Ajisafa on how Verizon reorganized L&D and HR to help the teams work more closely and strategically.
Over 2 decades now, working in different areas of mostly around the learning side of the company. We've done a lot of evolution over the years. We're now kind of strategically placed under HR, learning and careers, just to be very precise. And I lead a team of principal technical and product engineers who focus on building and managing customized learning applications to support those learning organizations that I did mention.
Next, we'll hear from Maris Krieger on why close collaboration with HR partners ensures learning solutions tackle the right problems at the right moment.
You're never solving for an HR problem or a learning problem. You're solving for the business problem. So it's really important to build the partnership with the business, listen really deeply, go deep down, find the root cause, what the problem is, not trying to do the band-aid solution or be the order taker. I have always problems with being order taker. So that's why the performance consulting concept works so well for me. And I love it because I can have a conversation with business and at the end of the conversation, I might say, actually, this is not a learning problem. It might be staffing problem. It might be compensation problem. It might be a leadership problem. When you have fixed all these things, come back and we were talking about the learning. And then you tell me about the full process. And then we are focusing and targeting the phase or the stage of the process that needs to be fixed or upskilled.
Next, we hear Jessica Farm's perspective on how L&D becomes more effective when it taps into insights from HR, talent management, and business partners across the organization.
Nothing is built in a vacuum. Nothing is siloed. You have to work with your partners. We work with talent management to understand where the gaps that they're seeing. They have a really great line to senior leaders, and those senior leaders provide really great feedback. Our HR business partners are also a critical source of information because they're out in the business. They know what's going on, and they can bring a lot of those really great insights back to us.
And finally, we'll hear from Andrea Gaggioli on how cross-functional partnerships with HR and leaders strengthens culture, connection, and adaptability across the workforce.
So these sessions ensure that team members feel supported and informed about diversity, about the respectful workplace that we want for our culture in order to adapt. So we also encourage a lot of cross-functional collaboration with HR, with the leaders, as I mentioned before, so we can foster this flexibility and resilience with our team members.
And now we'll turn it over to our panelists. How can HR and L&D teams better collaborate to better unify strategies for talent growth? And are there any specific changes that you've seen that either in the way teams collaborate or use technology that has strengthened the alignment between HR and L&D?
We just went through a big initiative, and so we've all come on to a holistic platform as an HRIS system. And so learning has an arm of the system. Talent acquisition has an arm of the system. The HRBPs has an arm of the system. The performance management team has an arm of the system. So what it's done is it's really holistically helped each one of us understand how our individual ecosystems feed into one large system. And what are the dependencies? And then what it naturally did is it triggered all of us to start asking questions. If X happens in our arm of the system, what does that trigger for you as Y in your arm of the system? And so what it's done is it's really helped us with streamlining our priorities. It's helped us streamline our collaboration and our interdependent connection points, where our impact points are. It also has helped us really, for our learners and for our employees, it's helped us streamline their experience so that we're not coming at it through just our myopic or one-dimensional lens, that now we're understanding holistically how each one of our employees is touching the system in a different way from our different centers of excellence, and how can we make that experience better holistically and collectively. So for us, it's been the conduit has been our system and our technology, but the result has been this unbelievable collaboration, alignment of strategy, alignment of priorities. It really has helped us improve each other's programs just inherently by streamlining it all. So I think that's one of the things that we've seen that's really helped connect not only L&D and HR, but all of our collective partners across the HR world.
I have a similar example, Kathy, but I want to talk about, because we just got on the same platform as our HR team as well. A huge benefit. And the collaboration, you just feel that it brings the innate collaboration, which has also been critical for us to understand the system, honestly. But one of the things I also want to talk about is, as maybe you've picked up on this year, there's been a lot of change in the direction this company has been going in. And there's a new culture. There's quite literally new performance culture behaviors. So we just changed our culture behaviors that are an expectation. And the way I see that is we are a change agent in L&D. If HR is setting those communications out and they're putting in the processes, we are an amplifier. And that is part of the value of the collaboration. That is the win-win for us. So we've included, for instance, those behaviors into all of our trainings because they have to connect. If not, we shouldn't be doing it. So that partnership has been extremely valuable for us. Not just valuable for us, it's shown the value of our organization to the business and to HR because it brings everything together. And so I just wanted to quickly mention that L&D is a change acceptance tool for the company. And the more we position ourselves that way, the more connected we are to the business priorities and the more value we bring. If not, you're doing training for the sake of training and it's not gonna work. It'll be the first organization to be reorged out when needed. For me, that's been the success story of the year.
I love that. I love that framing, Karen. I had never heard of that exactly, but it's very aligned with what I was gonna kind of close my thoughts on this one with, which is, well, one tactical, before I get to that, one tactical thing I think we're seeing a lot of organizations evolve to becoming focused on skills and how they utilize skills. This is not a perfect comparison, but I used to think when I started my career, everything was about job analysis. In other words, the focal point was the job. What does the job need? What's the job? What are the roles of the job? How do we fill that job and train to that job? And then we started to see an evolution to competency modeling, where we would look more at broader competencies. Well, now we're moving more toward how do organizations leverage the skills and what skills do they need to change and evolve over time. That I think might start to break down, that focus on skills might start to break down these historical silo job functions. Because even in my world, we often talk about how disconnected people who own the customer experience are from people who own the employee experience. But here we're talking about even within HR, we have silos. And even within learning and development, you have silos. So I hope and I think that as we move more toward focusing on human skills, human intelligence in combination with artificial intelligence, we're going to start to see a natural breakdown of some of those relatively artificial structures that we've created. But the last thing I'll point out, and I think you both made this point really well, is it always sticks with me, that Peter Drucker quote, which I'll paraphrase. It was that, we now realize that learning is a lifelong process, and our most pressing task is to teach people how to learn. And I think that's very true. And I think that's especially true in this age of AI. And if you think about it, L&D is the driver of that. It is quite possibly, through a certain lens, the most essential function that the organization has to ensure it thrives and survives in the future. So I love your perspective on that, Karen, that it's framing it as a change agent. I mean, I think that's even a better way to frame it.
Wow. And that's a wrap. What an incredible conversation we've been having in this 2-part season 2 NovoEDTalks season finale. A huge, huge thank you to our panelists, Benjamin, Karen, and Kathy, for sharing their wisdom and experiences, and to all of you for joining us in this episode and throughout the season. We hope these discussions have inspired you to think differently about how we develop talent, nurture leadership, and build organizations that are ready for whatever comes next. Until next time, thank you for listening, for learning with us, and for being part of the NovoEDTalks community.